yellow, blue, red blinking.
The yellow light of death. Since the early days of the PS3 life cycle, people trying to get this issue fixed by rather putting a hairdryer into it or just replacing the thermal paste on top of the big chip's metal plate, or just reball it or send it to a professional reballer to trying to fix it for lots of money, and then having not a guarantee to that the PS3 lasts a couple of years, so that the repair was worth it. Now the issue wasn't specifically the ball grid array or the solder balls in particular, it was a whole different story. But people seem to believe for years and still think that the method of reballing is the right and only way to do, and this isn't the case. And to see why this isn't the case and the issue is a completely different one, and the fix also, you will see in this video.
Turn it over. That's really all you have to do to set up. And you will need a hairdryer.
Okay, so instead of just having you listen or have nothing going on while I'm doing the hair drying, which is pre-recorded, I'm going to voice over some of
You can probably see and tell that this ain't really a work or a fix method. The PS3 is rather tickling it.
This is not a permanent fix.
Wow, you're really making a video about a temporarily newbie fix, putting a hairdryer at the back and rather tickling it, the PS3, instead of fixing it. Nice, good job. But this is also bad, because even I fix it, did a video on it how to fix the PS3 really professionally, but they failed miserably. Even though they're more the PC guys as far as I know, but they still failed on it, because all the work they did in this video was the wrong fix. Trying to imagine you have heart problems and you get your left arm amputated. Nice. Then TV shows come into place where they all do the same story. It works, yeah, but it was not really a fix for the PS3. They just harmed it even more, because the real issue was close, but it did turn out to be temporarily fixed. I don't know if personally if this was free or not, but I can tell it was very weird.
The back of the studio, we're attempting to fix all these PlayStation 3s which have suffered the so-called yellow light of death. We'll find out how they're getting on in just a moment. It's not the first time they've been fixed, by the way. Comedian and game guru Ian Lee has already been on this case.
Keep coming. Keep coming. Lovely, come on, come on. That'll do.
Ian Lee may be a self-declared Xbox man with a regular column on the Microsoft network, but he was just as interested as we were to hear that there was a potential fix for the PS3 yellow light of death. We set up our repair van outside Sony's London headquarters, and inside, independent console repairers Mark and Neil set to work straight away.
We need one more PlayStation. We've got two chaps in there. Let's give them that. Now, when did this one break?
August.
August. OK, we've got another one for you fellas. Are you seeing many of these PlayStations that are faulty?
We've seen a couple hundred so far.
Really?
Yes.
And it's the same thing every time, is it?
Same thing every time.
How long does it take you to fix one of these normally?
About 30 minutes.
That's because their repair is relatively simple. They take the consoles apart, clean them up, and heat the circuit boards in a special oven. In there, the solder joints melt and fix any broken connections. It's not long before Sony catch on, but not everyone sees the funny side.
Can you stop it, please?
Well, we're filming the street.
While Sony security worries about our cameras on the street outside, Mark and Neil say they finished their first machine.
OK, first one, let's have a look. Hey, it's working. That's your PlayStation. They fixed it.
See, that's the game.
Wow, they
Jamie Narborough
fixed
is
it
hoping
by...
we can repair his PS3 as well.
Wow, they fixed the PS3 by heating the whole board up. What a clever thing to do. Nice. I also would drink warm water in the summer. Anyway, there are other dudes that trying to do like the grandma's technique to fix the old radio with new technology. That ain't go so well. But yeah, people like those videos and give it a thumbs up for it's like a 6-year-old trying to fix my PS3 and ain't knowing what a screwdriver really is. I would be proud of my 6-year-old, but I wouldn't be proud of an adult that's trying to fix a PS3 this way. I mean, come on, bro. Alright, let's watch some of those. Never saw one of these. This looks good.
I looked at many videos and I found one solution to fix your yellow live death. Now, first thing, in the
Oh my
past,
God,
if you use
is he
a
14
hair dryer
only?
or a heat gun, I recommend you not doing it because so you just sort of screw it out.
Alright, at least he got some hair on his legs. Even though not much, but at least someone.
Alright.
Some. Oh shit.
Hey, I'm back here again.
Yeah.
Aluminum balls.
What he did
Now,
there?
Do you think
You already capped it.
just pop it up? Smear right on. Through these holes right here. That's how you can tell it's actually in right.
This like PS3 oven. Yeah. Alright. Oh shit. This is a good one. That doesn't work. He really puts this in the oven, man. Never watched some of those, always saw pictures like it and stuff. Because I couldn't do this to my art yet. Oh man. The other people in the room watching him are probably thinking, man, this is a total idiot. What I have married here. At how much degrees is it? Well, it doesn't matter. He puts it in a fucking oven and yeah. You can't even fucking film. Nice job, bro. You could make it through Pac-Man. But there's also good people, nice people that know what to do and show it off to a ton of people and charge no money for it. Because this is a video tutorial on how to do it the right way.
I got the PlayStation 3, which has, we can say again, a yellow light of that. This PlayStation was, I think, about 2 years ago. It was here for repair. I have repaired it and it was running all just perfect. and now the guy told me that PlayStation has, again, we can say, a yellow light of that. So you have saw my last videos and you already know about, we can say, this bad neck token capacitors, and on this video now I'm gonna just do a quick thing with you guys together. We're gonna just open this all and we're gonna just go directly for the neck token capacitors. I'm gonna just change the one that I think that it could be broken to another one. This is, we can say, the same one, but it's we can say a working one. So need my plugs. I hope you guys can see all. So this will just be a quick video, just to test. Okay, guys, you should do the same here. And also remember on which side the we can say the capacitor was. Yeah, place it here inside. This is very important. So the letters are here from left to right. And let me see if you can see that all. Yeah, okay, still okay. Yeah. And now let's do this NSC style. Okay, let's begin. Again, low fan speed, 380 will just be okay. I need my, yeah, this one. And now let's just begin. Wait. Also recommended to give here some flux or flux, just that the neighbor chip will not get damaged also. But maybe we're gonna change them boot, because I just want to test if the peoples will be, we can say, able just to repair the PlayStation with, we can say, an original capacitor. So that means if yes, you can go on and take, we can say, a broken PlayStation Fat Edition, and you can take the good working ones and replace it with the bad ones. So guys, need to take a sit. Take care also of the other parts. The other SMDs, and just take care on all, or at all. Here we got him. I'm gonna now quickly install, we can say, the new one, as long it is all, we can say, hot, because you already have saw how much time it takes. So now we're gonna just place this here this one here, and wait, yes, something like that. Wait, okay. I need to stop to drink so much coffee. While you are reflowing, or we can say soldering the new chip, just don't move too fast. It can fly away, guys. I'm not kidding. When the chip begins to move, it will get directly, automatically in the place back again. Yeah, soldering has begun to melt. It looks good. Don't touch the chip now. Just add some flux, but don't touch it right now. And the last time. So here we go. Looks good, guys. Yeah, it's really laying down on the motherboard like it should be. It's real soldered, so okay. No panic on Titanic. It's real soldered. You can clean later. We can say the rest of flux. Sometimes you just have here. You can clean this all with isopropanol. Nothing is smelled. Nothing is exploded. The chip is sitting really great, just like it would be original. Connected in. Be sure that the power switch is off. Okay, here, important. Otherwise, you're gonna get an electric shock. Here in Germany, 220 volts till 230. So it's all inside. This is there. We don't need this here. We don't need the Wi-Fi card. We don't need the Blu-ray drive. We have done all. So here, let's go and let's make a test if this is gonna work. Red light, just wait about 10 seconds so the energy and the PSU will be, we can say, full of energy. And now let's test the stuff. Here we go, it's working, guys. But now I'm gonna shut it down. And why? Yeah, because the thermal compound is just, we can say, the old one. And I have just closed it for the test. Here you have now the best proof.
Now it's getting really cringy, and yeah, still professionally made, but you see what I'm probably guess what I'm talking about. Yes. Just see there, they unsoldered the CPU from the whole board, and yeah, this hurts and hurted me back in the day, 2015, and this is only 5 years ago when the PS4 was already 2 years, I think, was out. So yeah, and they still did this crap, which was the old school method that everybody believed and wasn't really a method too. Let me show you something. Well, the video is from 2014, back in the day, yes, and it says that the truth about a dead laptop and GPUs and reballing them. Yes, this is about laptops, but you can also apply this to the PS3 because it works exactly the same way as they do that methods in laptops as well. And I'm trying to do a voiceover now and tell you what the fuck is going on.
Hi, today I want to talk about reballing very shortly. This video is going to get me into a lot of trouble with the people in this business that do what I do for a living because they don't want to hear this. A lot of them know it's true but don't really want to believe it, or they do actually believe enough in their own bullshit that they believe that what I'm saying is false. But this is something that you as a customer, and even more importantly, if you do this as a business, that you as a business need to hear before you dig yourself into a miserable, miserable hole and ruin your reputation. And that is that reballing is bullshit. Reballing is crap. Reballing is not repair. 99% of the time, I mean 99% of the time, reballing is not repair. And there are legitimate uses for reballing that I'm going to explain later on in the video. But to get my point across right now in the beginning of this video, 99% of the time, when you hear that somebody is going to fix a laptop by reballing something, they are full of shit, and this is not going to work properly. So it's actually a couple of things. The first thing, above all, are shitty chips. These chips suck. These chips that are coming out by ATI, these chips that ATI put out are just as bad as the shit that NVIDIA was putting out in 2008. Maybe like one step better, but not really. Secondly, as you know, most Apple machines, in spite of them being marketed to people who do graphics for a living, in spite of them being marketed to people who use their computer seriously for a living, they have no ventilation holes on the bottom of it. So while even a $300 piece of garbage PC has all these little vent holes in the bottom so it gets air, MacBooks have shit. They have this little exhaust in the back that's just a complete fucking joke. They don't have any real real ventilation, which is why they run so damn hot. So how are you going to fix it? You're going to see a lot of different options online. You're going to see a lot of different options all across the world for things that you can do to fix it. And I'm here to tell you that most of these options suck. A lot of them involve something called reballing. You've probably heard of reballing, reflowing, and you don't really know what these things mean because you're just somebody who wants to go back to editing videos so they can make money. So I'm going to try to sum it up and make it very, very simple for you. These chips connect to the board using little balls of solder. It used to be that when you had a chip or a CPU that these things were so small and simple that you could just have legs shooting out the side of it and then all those little legs get soldered onto the board. And as time went on and devices got smaller and smaller and more complicated, you ran out of space to put these connections. So what they did is they decided instead of just using the outside of the chip, we can actually use the entire chip and put these little balls on. So now we can use the entire chip to have connections that go to the board. And all of these are in the form of little solder balls that go underneath the chip. So these are solder balls that are underneath the chip. And a lot of people have been going on and on with this myth, this silly myth, that the problem with graphics chips failing is that the balls underneath the chip are the cause of the problem. And I want to go into why people believe that to be true, why people continue to believe that it is true in spite of evidence that it is not true, and what the real solution is. People believe it to be true because when they replace the balls, the chip works again. So in order to actually remove the balls from the chip and put new ones on, you have to lift the chip off the board. Soldering requires very, very high temperatures. So let's say I have this machine over here. I'm going to lift this chip at something like 217 Celsius, and I'm going to put it back on with leaded solder balls at something like 180 Celsius. Now that's going to apply a lot of heat to the chip. And I'm not actually fixing the chip by replacing the balls, but the thing is, to replace these solder balls, I have to heat the chip. And the process of heating the chip is actually what's fixing it. I'm fixing this chip by heating it, not by replacing the solder balls. So the problem in this chip, the real true problem, is not the solder balls. The solder balls are fine, and I'm going to go on to tell you how you can see that for yourself. The problem is the actual chip. So here, you see this little silver part in the top of the chip? So see this silver thing up here? That is connecting to the green thing over here through little bumps inside the chip. And then this green thing attaches to the board through solder balls. Now the problem is that the actual bumps inside of this chip are completely destroyed. They're sodomized. They're beat to shit over long periods of time of being heated incredibly within systems with poor ventilation. And again, also, a lot of these chips, they frankly just suck. So when you have this combination, when you have those bumps get messed up, you can actually fix them through heating the chip. So when you heat this chip to 200 Celsius, you're actually moving around and messing with those little bumps inside the chip itself, and that fixes the chip. The problem is that the chip itself is dead. The chip itself is failing. The entire wafer, everything inside of here, everything how this is set up is just completely falling apart and going to shit. And you've just happened to move some of this around by heating it. It's kind of like using a piece of wood to hold up a broken wall, and then when the wall moves a little bit, you just kick the piece of wood, and it just so happens to move back into place and keep the wall from falling on you. But the problem is the next time that the wind blows, it's going to blow your wall back down again. You haven't actually fixed the problem. You haven't fixed and put a proper wall up and you haven't done proper construction. You're just holding it up with a piece of wood. And the same is true when you heat up a dead chip. So the reason people believe that reballing works, the reason they believe the myth that the solder balls are the problem, is because when they do this process and they do this reballing, it actually works again.
And it's the same story on the PS3. People send those in for reball, and after that it runs, paid some like $100 for it, and it runs again. But after a few weeks, maybe a month, maybe a year, if it didn't play like 6 hours a day for a straight month, then it starts to die again. And now you know a little bit and a little details more why this is so shitty to believe that the PS3s just be fixed because of that. The only problem on the PS3 itself though is the thermal paste on the CPU core itself, on the silver part that my guy here showed, Louis Rossmann exactly, that he showed. Okay, this was a GPU though, not a CPU, but the CPU is kind of similar on the PS3, similar looking, and this is what I always say to people: not send it in for reball. Reballing is crap when you reball like this. And generally speaking, I'm going to show you a little bit more from other YouTubers and what they're speculating on and talking about and stuff. But from me, I'm kind of out again a little bit, and let you see this, maybe take a coffee or something. But yeah, reballing it is not the case, because the problem is a whole different story.
PS3 users began to report a problem with their systems wherein powering up resulted in the power light briefly flashing yellow before finally flashing red. This event quickly received the nickname the yellow light of death. Paired with this name was the simple explanation that Sony used lead-free solder and the solder around the processors had cracked due to thermal stress. This explanation spread like wildfire throughout the internet. Where did it begin? What is the source? Why is it so easily accepted? It starts with, of all things, the Xbox 360. Microsoft knew the 360 had problems not too long after launching at the end of 2005. They admitted as much in the summer of 2007 and extended the warranty of any consoles that exhibited the Red Ring of Death to 3 years after the purchase date. The story of the Red Ring of Death is worth its own video, but our take from the 360 fiasco is simply the idea that the problem arose from using lead-free solder. In early 2003, the Restriction of Hazardous Substances Directive was adopted by the European Union. The directive restricts the use of various hazardous substances when electronic equipment is manufactured, and it took effect on July 1st, 2006. One notable substance on this list is lead. Naturally, this led to a mass adoption of lead-free solder. Solder is an alloy, a mix of different elements. A different mixture is going to mean different properties, and the properties for tin lead solder aren't going to be the same for something that is tin silver copper. When the PS3 started to show signs of trouble via a brief yellow light, what Sony claims to be a general failure, it very quickly received a comparison to what people believe had happened to the Xbox 360. Red Ring of Death for the 360 became Yellow Light of Death for the PS3. The 360 allegedly had issues caused by the use of lead-free solder, therefore Sony must have the same problem. What sort of analysis was done for this to be reported as the problem for the PlayStation 3 that resulted in the yellow light of death? An analysis so easily accepted across the web. As far as I can tell, there was no real analysis, at least none using an accurate sample size of yellow-lit PS3s, and therefore no conclusive evidence given to suggest that Sony had an Xbox 360 rate of failure.
Well, let's say 90% of the PS3's yellow light of death is an issue of overheating. Rather, it's on the RSX or on the CPU, the cell, and can be fixed by deleting the CPU and GPU, and problems come.
Message forums, articles, videos, and more over the last decade, you'll probably land on statements based on one or both of these two things. Here are some specifics from the TV report. 1. Sony says that there are various reasons that can cause the PS3 to give the yellow light, and they can't say for sure what the problem is without taking the machine apart. This makes sense to me. Yellow light means the system has a problem and it needs to be diagnosed properly. 2. X-rays were taken and displayed on the TV series that showed trapped gas in the circuit board, and it was reported that Sony responded to this saying that wasn't what the problem was. The X-ray was only shown for a few seconds on the show, and not much of an explanation was given. I've seen a few people cite this as the eureka moment when it comes to mass diagnosis, despite the fact the show didn't actually explain what was being shown. 3. In a pre-recorded story that aired during the show, a team of people the TV show assembled repair a PS3 by shoving it into a special oven to perform a reflow of the solder, and that appears to fix the problem. After returning from the story, the host stated that, by the way, 4 of the 11 PS3s they fixed had already stopped working. I'll accept Sony's statement, diagnose the problem. As for the other 2 items, I have issues with them. My first is non-technical. I do not believe that you can take an X-ray of a single console and conclude that you have found the cause for every PS3's yellow light of death. One console is not an accurate sample size for mass diagnosis. As a matter of fact, why would you ever make a mass diagnosis of a general fault and apply a blanket fix to 11 PlayStation 3s based on a single X-ray? The PS3 central processor and graphics processor are built and attached to the motherboard using FC-BGA technology. FC stands for flip chip, a term that refers to the assembly method for the processor. We'll detail that shortly. BGA stands for ball grid array, which refers to the method used to connect the chip to the PS3 motherboard, an array of solder balls. Those of you that have built computers over the years know a little something about the term grid array. This Intel Core i7 processor uses a land grid array. The processor has a grid of landing spots underneath it that sit on a bed of pins when placed in a socket on a motherboard. LGA, land grid array. An earlier processor, such as this 486DX2, uses PGA, which stands for pin grid array. It has pins underneath. Both processors can be added to or removed from a motherboard with the appropriate socket. Ball grid array is a mounting method wherein solder balls between the chip and the motherboard are reflowed to join the two together. Let's take a quick look at the layers of a flip chip BGA solution. There are 3 main layers to consider: the die and the substrate of the chip, and the PCB, a motherboard in our case, to which the chip will connect. The die is the workhorse. This is where everything happens, an integrated circuit made up of many tiny transistors. The substrate is part of the CPU's package and is used as a mounting interface to connect the die to the motherboard, as well as hold support components, such as capacitors that need to be as close to the die as possible. A conventional method for die-substrate connection is to mount the die on the substrate and then electrically connect the two using wires from the top of the chip to the top of the substrate. In the early 1960s, IBM started us down the path of using an alternative method for interconnections. Rather than using wires, solder bumps are placed on the metal terminals at the top of the chip. The chip is flipped over and paired with metal pads with identical spacing on the substrate. The bumps are then reflowed to create a bond between the die and the substrate. To finish the package, an insulating substance called underfill is injected between the bumps and a heat spreader lid is placed over the top. Thermal paste is used between the die and the heat spreader, and the spreader is glued to the substrate along its edges. There is your flip chip sandwich. Oversimplified, but hopefully understandable. The last step is to use a ball grid array of solder balls to connect the CPU package to the motherboard. Some enthusiasts have removed the lids from the processors in order to replace the thermal paste between the lid and the die. If you look at this photo, you can see the die in the center, along with the gray underfill for each of the two processors. The GPU has a few extra components mounted to its substrate. With a bit of background on the basic assembly of a flip chip and how it connects to the motherboard, let's return to the cross-section illustration. Okay, the claim typically associated with the yellow light of death is that the solder balls that connect the processor to the motherboard are no longer making proper electrical connection due to cracking from thermal stress. When the TV series mentioned earlier elected to use their special oven to reflow the board, they didn't isolate a problem. They actually changed a lot of variables by applying extreme temperatures across the entire board. This doesn't specifically reflow the GPU and CPU solder balls, it reflows pretty much everything. A second method people turn to is reballing. It is as simple as it sounds. The board is heated up in a localized area to free the solder balls, the processor and old solder balls are removed, and then the processor is reattached to the board using fresh solder balls, either lead-free once again or with lead this time. Both a reflow and a reball still involve playing a wild card, heat. Whether the entire board is heated up or just the area where the processor is mounted, the heat is naturally going to affect other things, especially cranked up to reflow temperatures for lead-free solder. There is also a concern that the problem stemming from excessive heating and cooling is not in the lead-free solder balls that connect the processors to the board, but rather the solder bumps that connect the die to the substrate. Reliability can be compromised because of a large thermal expansion difference between the two layers. The underfill used as part of the package is supposed to help improve reliability by reducing shear stress on the solder bumps, but by the way, the underfill used on flip chips of this era has also been cited as problematic. These are all theories given with no evidence of one or more being the problem that causes a PS3 to experience a yellow light of death. For all the possibilities mentioned, if you're heating the entire board or just the processor area of a PlayStation 3, you are throwing a wild card cure-all at what is essentially an unknown problem. So is that it? Regardless of the specifics, we can assume the problem is still most likely in or under the chip somewhere? No, it gets better. Enter NEC Token and their special capacitors. Let's talk about processors for a moment. They can be demanding. They want proper, clean power now and to be kept cool. We already know the PS3 is struggling a bit when it comes to the cooling. Let's focus on power. If a processor expects, say, 1 volt for power, that is what it wants. It doesn't want to have 1-ish volts on a regular basis, and it doesn't want 1 volt to suddenly have the bottom fall out of it and drop to half a volt for just a moment, only because something else needed a lot of power and the power supply was a bit slow to respond to the demand. The power rails that supply a processor typically need a support team of capacitors in order to help maintain power. Decoupling capacitors store extra energy that can be used to help maintain the voltage. So, what about these capacitors? Well, they were developed in the early mid-2000s and apparently have a rather short lifespan. Toshiba laptop users discovered this the hard way when their computers wouldn't start. The solution is to remove the specialized capacitor and work in 4 tantalum capacitors in its place, making sure the replacement's capacitance total meets or exceeds the original cap and that the ESR remains just as low. This restores the laptop to working order. It seems to be a very common problem and repair with the Toshiba A300. And of course, the PlayStation 3 uses 8 of these same capacitors, 4 on each side of the motherboard, 2 pairs for each processor. If these caps can't help maintain proper voltage for the CPU or GPU, guess what? Yellow light of death. So, what is wrong with your yellow lit PS3? The most appropriate answer is, I don't know. You can either assume or you can diagnose. Assuming is easier. Of course, there are easy fixes that don't require diagnosing a problem. It is a fair assumption that the original capacitors in your Sega Game Gear have failed and need to be replaced. The point of this video is to state that very little research has been done to facilitate an assumption that the solder balls in the PS3 are the primary reason for a yellow light of death situation. I want to make it clear that I'm not saying a reball isn't a potential fix for a PS3 yellow light of death. My point is that it isn't the solution, and that we as a community should adopt less of a tunnel vision approach when it comes to diagnosing and repairing consoles. Thanks for watching.
This was a long technical video, and if it wasn't, you can check out there's some other stuff from other YouTubers on how to actually have some fixes. But I'ma tell ya, and if you heard it, there is no real fixer for it. Once it's broken, it is forever broken. It will never be as if it would be new. So I hope you liked this video. Check some more stuff out here, and see you guys in the next one. Peace.